we are here with 1024 Ministries, and I left some information on your chairs there, but we are located out of Eaton, Colorado. My name is Colette McFarland, and I'm the director there. We serve all of Northern Colorado, but we work with single parent families and trafficking survivors. We do monthly food boxes for both of those groups of people, and then we have a economic empowerment program, Restoring Freedom workshop, where we bring trafficking survivors in. We do curriculum on workforce readiness, mental health, financial health. They do a culinary program. We eat dinner with them, all these beautiful, wonderful things, and then do a Bible study with them as well. And then we go out and do trainings like this, because really, if we can prevent this from happening up front or get those services right away, it's even more beneficial. So if you could go to the next slide there. And I'll let Sandra introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Sandra Crone, and I'm a certified peer and family specialist at Summit Stone Health Partners. And so what I do there is I work with Amen Wellness Court, so Larimer County. And so I work with clients who have mental health and SUD things going on, as well as TBIs, cognitive, intellectual things. And so we work with them to get them connected to like Social Security, community like socialization, and I support them with like practicing self-care. I do some of their nails. We go on hikes. So it's really cool. I also co-facilitate SUDIOP in Fort Collins, Summit Stone. So yeah, that's just kind of a little brief touch on what I do.
And Sandra has also done Homeland Security stuff in Denver.
Yes.
With PD doing. So do you mind me sharing?
Oh, go ahead, yeah.
Sandra is a lived experience expert. And so she has an amazing, I'm really glad that she's here with us today, because she was part of our program. She now comes back as a peer support specialist for us as well. But she kind of speaks your language as well. So I was really glad to have her here. But she has worked alongside law enforcement as well. So just has some great experience to share with us today. So who here feels like they know exactly what human trafficking is, what it looks like, what it doesn't look like? Okay, you do. Hey, that's great. That's good. Yeah, well, you're coming up next. So I'm glad to be here, and I appreciate that you do. That's great. But it is something, even when I wanted to, I'm an outsider. I am not a lived experience expert. When I started to try to learn about it, it's really gray, and it's really hard to find good information. So we really appreciate you allowing us to come in and talk about it. So it is against the law legally. Labor trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, and transportation of people, basically the use of force, fraud, or coercion to get people to do acts of work. And I'll go a little bit more into that in a second. Sex trafficking is the same thing. Force, fraud, or coercion has to be shown in order to get a person to perform a sex act. That being said, if somebody is under the age of 18, they cannot legally make that choice. So even if they are deciding to, or what they would call deciding to be a part of that world, they can't legally do that. So if anybody is trading anything of value for an act of sex with somebody under 18, that person is actually the trafficker. So if it's a bed, if it's drugs, if it's food, any of those things. So that's one thing that is really understood, underreported. We love it. Not at all when we see on the news, they'll say child prostitute. That's not a thing. They can't make that choice. So myths and misconceptions. So a lot of people, when they think of trafficking, they think of going across a border, a state line, those types of things. That can happen, but it's not required. You can be trafficked in your own home, in your own room, so there doesn't need to be that movement. That movement is actually the smuggling. So when you talk about going across state borders, sometimes when there is immigration and those types of things, it can make people more vulnerable to it, but it's not required. Who are the traffickers? Unfortunately, it can be anybody, right? We want them to be like the big, bad, scary people. That's not typically how it works. Unfortunately, traffickers can be a mom, a dad, a family member, an intimate partner, an acquaintance, or a stranger. Oftentimes, especially the traffickers, are very well known in a community. They have a lot of prestige in the community. They might have, large businesses. All of those things are typically very magnetic. It's a lot easier to hide those things when everybody likes you, and the people that you are using have a lot less prestige in the community, if that makes sense. And again, who are the victims? So it can be men and boys, women and girls. It's not one sex, one gender. And actually, like LGBTQ community typically also are easily victims as well because of vulnerabilities that they have. Does it have to be ongoing? No, it can happen one time and you're still a victim of trafficking, or it can happen many, many times over many years. There's often overlap with a lot of other crimes. So trafficking is one of the fastest growing organized crimes in the world. When you talk about drug traffickers, all those people, you have to find the drugs, you have to have a supplier, all of that. It's a lot easier to find people, right? So it's huge and growing. A lot of times it looks like domestic violence, drug possession, because a lot of times those traffickers will maybe traffic drugs and people. Identity theft, white collar crime, sometimes that crime is introduced to then further victimize that person and control them. And then demand fuels sex trafficking. So if there's no demand, it's basically a supply and demand model, right? If you talk about the demand for commercial sex, for example, or labor, and you have people who are truly choosing to be there, and we'll talk about that in a second, and then you have everything that's left, that's what's filled by that trafficker. So any of that demand is going to be filled by the traffickers. And then one that I wanted to touch on, it only happens in big cities, right? We think of, okay, we know it happens in Denver. We know it's happening on Colfax. We know all of those things are happening. It happens in the small towns just the same. Sometimes in rural communities, so I'm from Eaton, it's easier to hide when you have land and buildings that nobody knows what's happening in those buildings, those types of things. So we just want to dispel that myth as well. So this is what you'll see on TV. This is what you'll see on the news, those types of things. The problem with this, and especially when we're talking victims, is that they're typically not chained in a basement. They're not tied up. This might be what the buyers do to them, right? But this gives a false sense of, well, I wasn't chained up, so this must not have happened to me. I wasn't, locked in the basement, so this must not have happened to me. So a lot of times what we find when we're working with victims is that they don't even understand that that's what happened to them. Because there's so much, and you guys understand that mental manipulation piece of it much better than probably a lot of other people do. But that's why sometimes what's seen in the media. So things like Taken, and even Sound of Freedom is really good. It shows a lot about what happens in other countries. That's not as much what happens here in the States. So trafficking and choice. So when you talk about trafficking, like we said, under 18, you can't make the choice. Even if you think you're there by choice, you legally cannot make that choice. So that sometimes when we're talking with the kids, they're like, well, I'm choosing to be there. No, you legally can't make that choice. And so especially when we're talking 16, 17-year-olds, it's really important as you're working with them for them to understand, no, like you were not of the age to be able to make that choice. There's some other things too, like stripping, OnlyFans, camming, sugaring, and modeling. Does everybody know what OnlyFans is? You don't? Okay. So OnlyFans is basically like an online pornography site. There's definitely a large group of people out there that are like, everybody who's on there is choosing to be on there, right? Like they're doing pictures of their feet or whatever is like the joke about it, right? But actually OnlyFans is used oftentimes by traffickers. So it's a great way for them to make extra money. So, hey, while you're being trafficked, I might video it. And then now I can put that online, and it's another revenue stream for me because it's all about money, really, for the traffickers and power and control. But OnlyFans will also be used by buyers. So they've gotten smart as far as law enforcement, and so they'll say, hey, send me your OnlyFans content before I meet with you, just to make sure that I'm not going to meet with the cop. I think everybody knows what stripping is. That can sometimes be kind of a form of labor trafficking that will happen kind of alongside of that. Camming's kind of the same thing as OnlyFans. Stripping also can be a great place for traffickers to recruit victims, because a lot of times those individuals maybe are feeling like their only value comes from their sexuality or their body, and so it's a great way for them to recruit. Modeling and then sugaring. Sugaring is, has anybody heard of sugaring? I hadn't really before, and you probably can even explain it better than me, but it's basically like they'll place ads, or they kind of recruit others saying, it's just he's going to be your sugar daddy. So just go to dinner with this guy. That's all you have to do. Just go to dinner. He'll buy you dinner. He'll give you gifts. And I think we can all see how that can really easily become a trafficking situation. So it's kind of a next step to that. Of the people who are actually choosing sex work, so there is a group of people who are saying, I want to choose that, especially this group. I feel like we'll understand 90+% of those people who have had sexual abuse in their past. So, and especially a Christian group, we understand, right, that your value is never in that. But just so you can kind of understand, like, there's really, and oftentimes these people, and we'll go into the vulnerabilities, but they are, they're not doing that because they feel like they have so many other options, if that makes sense.
Do many of them fall back into, like, so people that, like the sex positive group stepping in saying, well, I want to do this, and then do they usually end up in the trafficking situation where they're then coerced?
Oftentimes, yes. That's an excellent and very insightful question. So oftentimes, yes. Yeah, and actually, I'll let Sandra will tell a little bit more of her
Actually,
story later.
I worked with a girl on a documentary, and she was an escort, and she had a pimp, and her pimp was her husband, and she had children with him, and he would go out, and it started as something small, and now it's big to where that's all she does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of times they'll have that, and we'll kind of talk about who the traffickers are and that kind of thing. But yeah, it can be a partner, right? Is where it's like, okay, I'm in a relationship, and so I think this is a positive thing, and then all of a sudden, oh, I expect this, and or I'm going to be. But to your point, I think too, people can feel like they're going in by choice, and then they get into a situation like you're saying where there is like that coercion or violence or psychological manipulation, where at that point they are being trafficked too, for sure. And I think that can lead to because of what you guys do, I think it's important to point out that a lot of that can lead to shame, and they have a hard time getting out of it or getting healing because they're going, oh, I made this choice, but then they didn't make that the choice to be coerced, and so that can be important part of the healing, I think, too, is stepping away from that shame. If that makes sense. So really what the traffickers do is they come in and they are master manipulators. They're going to spot a vulnerability, and then they're going to offer a solution. So like for labor trafficking, illegal immigration status, or actually even like going to a source country and recruiting there. People that can't speak the language, as we talked about immigration, obviously, if you're in a new country, you can't speak the language, you need to feed your family, it's easier to coerce you into doing things that really aren't fair. Lack of resources in their source country. So again, being in the source country, making a promise of a job that's X, Y, and Z, and when they get there, it's really not that. Lack of financial resources. There is a lot of racial disparity. With labor trafficking, 63% in the US are Hispanic, 17% Asian, and then with sex trafficking, 40% are Black. So as you can see, that it doesn't match the demographics here. Sex trafficking, again, the vulnerabilities and risk factors, like we said, that previous sexual abuse, involvement in the foster care system for multiple reasons, single parent families, history of domestic violence, substance use by themselves or their family, housing and food instability, as I mentioned, the LGBTQ community. 40% of homeless youth are in that community, and homeless youth is a huge part of who's trafficked as youth. And then the cycle of violence theory. So that cycle of violence theory is if you had domestic violence in you guys probably know it better than I do, but if you had it in your family, it becomes normalized. And so you think that that's what love looks like. So high ACE scores, you guys all know the ACE scores, 4 or above for trafficking is you're much more likely to be vulnerable to it. So labor trafficking. So, and I have to, so involuntary servitude, debt bondage, and peonage. I just want to give you guys full understanding of what this is because it's kind of hard to understand, I feel like. So involuntary servitude is you cannot like leave or stop working freely. So you are actually either truly like you can't leave that location or you'll be beaten or they're saying they're gonna, deport you, whatever it might be. Debt bondage is when the value of the work you do exceeds the debt. So let's say that they feed you, they give you a place to stay, maybe transportation. Well, if they're charging you more for all of those things than you're making, you're in debt bondage. So that's kind of how that happens. And then peonage is forcing someone to work to pay off a debt without the person's ability to freely choose or quit. So just so that makes a little bit more sense. And then exploitation for labor trafficking happens through the, like I was mentioning, the threats of deportation, right? So if you don't do what I'm asking you to do, I'll send you back home. Getting blacklisted from working in the US, again, wages being withheld or taken, fraudulent or misinformation about the jobs or working conditions. That's a huge part of how they're getting those people in the first place. Or excessive hours, especially when we talk. So a lot of labor trafficking is happening in agricultural work. It's happening in massage parlors. There's in hotel cleaners, those types of things. And so when they look at it with that, and this is specific to labor trafficking, 92% are foreign nationals and 59% had threats of immigration used to control them. So you don't see that as much with the sex trafficking. Sex trafficking is actually more so the highest percentage is American nationals. So what does recruiting look like, right? In the technology age, a lot of it is done online, right? And we don't want to hear that because I have teenagers. So, we want to think, oh no, they are like, it's at Walmart and they are taking them, but that's really not what it looks like, right? They're finding kids or adults who are online and showing some of those vulnerabilities, whether it's maybe showing too much skin, talking about how much they hate their family, hate their parents, hate their life, looking for money, all of those things, and they swoop in and they provide the solution, right? Which doesn't end up being a solution. But so Tinder, for obvious reasons, right? Any of the dating apps can be a location for finding people. Roblox, any kind of video games where there is a chat feature, unfortunately, that's a place that they can be recruited as well. You think of kids who are really isolating themselves, a lot of them play video games, right? And so that's a great way to find those kids and start engaging with them. And it's not, just like all evil, right? Evil masquerades as the angel of light, right? And so they're going to look like a friend. They're going to look like the only person who understands this kid. And then when it really comes out, it's the opposite, unfortunately. But Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, all of those are places. Anytime somebody can communicate with a person or adult, they're doing it there. And then so there was a study done by Polaris. When they know the recruitment sources, 42% are a family member, 39% are an intimate partner, only 6% is kidnapping in the US. So there's like this huge, everybody's like, be careful at Walmart. Yes, be careful at Walmart, be careful when you're out in public in a dark alley. But typically traffickers are much smarter. And we'll talk about kind of their structure, but they know how to not get in trouble, right? So they're not gonna, that's a lot riskier than having somebody feel like they're falling in love with them or promising them a job of modeling or promising them a job in the field. They're gonna do that first. You wanna?
How grooming works through pornography, built an absorbing and romantic relationship, online friendships or relationships, de-individualization, loss of self-awareness, total institutionalization, place of work and residence where people are cut off from the wider community for a considerable time, enclosed formally administrated life, like a cult, replaces ideologies with a new set of beliefs. Yeah. So the types of traffickers are a guerrilla pimp, strong arm pimp. Usually those are the meanest types. Those are the ones that usually hurt the women or the men or whoever. And then commonly gang associated, both sex and drug traffickers, severe physical and psychological harm. And they could induce drug addictions on victims. There's also the boyfriend pimp, which is the most common. Psychological and emotional abuse, and mimics interpartner violence. So, yeah. We have the non-intimate partner pimp. This could include strong arm pimp, guerrilla pimp, again, female traffickers, familial, integrational transmission of prostitution. Parents could have substance abuse problems, sell children for sex to pay, and then community, religious, or relationship prestige. And then there's ritual abuse to make money.
So part of the problem of what we see out there is when we have a trafficked person and they're saying, hey, I was part of satanic ritual abuse, but maybe they are also high when you're, coming across them, or those types of things. These are things that those of us outside of that world, it sounds really hard to believe. But of everybody, we've worked with at least 2 survivors that have been part of satanic ritual abuse. We have another few that were actually part of and I say this because we all know that this is not what true Christians are like, but part of Christian cults where, if your grandfather is selling you to somebody, you don't question grandpa because he is the paternal, so there's a lot of those types of things. And so it's really important that we understand this. In the familial side, I feel like you guys really might have a unique ability to see this. Some of these other pieces, gang related and those types of things, we can I sometimes feel like we can identify who those individuals might be. People who are trafficked within their families, they're not seeing, those people are maybe going to be identified in school, hopefully maybe by a coach, those types of things, but it can be happening right under our noses, unfortunately. So familial trafficking, one of the survivors that we've worked with, she said the trafficker is both that child's exploiter and their caregiver. The exploitation of the victim is happening at the hands of somebody who's supposed to take care of them, right? And so I was joke because I don't actually believe in lower levels of hell, but I think there is a lower level of hell for those people who are doing it to their own children, right? But it's so confusing for these kids because this person who loves them and is taking care of them is also doing this. And so you guys, I'm sure, see this with child abuse cases and those types of things as well. But these people have a really hard time coming forward because they're like, well, I love this person. This person takes care of me. And honestly, we see that when it's a partner as well, because they're like, I love this person. It's a lot like domestic violence, right? I love this person. I still have this connection to this person. So it's just really important that we can see that. What we also see as a service provider is a lot of times this will happen to a kid, and then they will feel like they're choosing that later on in life, but they were really taught that as a kid, that's where your value comes from. That's what you're there for. Christine says she's in California, but she actually was exploited in the basement of a church. From the ages of 2 to 18, her dad told her that was what she was created for, and they would bring a ticket like she was a carnival ride. And she still has faith, which I think is amazing. So, but it's just important to understand what that can look like, because it's things that when we haven't experienced that, it can be really hard and heavy and almost feel like it can't happen, right? But it's awful too.
All right, so this is pimp control trafficking and what that silo looks like. So at the top we have the pimp, and then we have the bottom. And so the bottom is usually the person that books the hotels, reprimands the women, and also recruits people. And so below that is the prostituted folks, and then below that is the tricks. And so the tricks are the folks who are buying the sex and all the things. And then we have the folks on the outside, which are the squares. So in the game, which is what they call it, the squares are people who have no idea what trafficking looks like, pimp control trafficking. They just have no clue.
And there is like a full lingo that goes with this, right?
Yes.
And we didn't bring it because it can sometimes be too much. But if you guys want that, like, there is literally their own language. So this is part of it. The bottom is actually a bottom B word. And so, you know, when you hear some of these words, it's good. And it was like, especially if there's any of you that are working with kids, there's a lot of acronyms, just like everywhere else. So we can pass that along and email that to you if you need it. But just so you can kind of understand what this looks like, and then she's going to explain how it looks a little bit different.
Yeah, so from my experience, I was trafficked by a gang in Fairbanks, Alaska, and so my structure is very complex. And so we're going to look over here at this whiteboard, and so at the top were the people who were in charge, okay? Then we go down to like families and like strangers, okay? And then these are my traffickers here, and then they all have bottoms, okay? And so here I am. I thought I was up here. I really did not know about any of these people. And then they were trying to get me to recruit. And so it's a little different than pimp control trafficking. There's a lot of people involved. And so I was being controlled by meth and spice, and I was selling it. And so I felt like I had all this power, and I was actually incredibly broken. I have two daughters, and I lost them. And so I have worked very hard, and I actually got them back in my life. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, so I work very hard to not be afraid of these people, because I still have problems with these folks, and I just am like, whatever. Anyways, and so I just use that as strength and continue to educate people about my experience, because not everybody is brave enough to talk about it. So yeah, that's what I got about that.
So labor trafficking warning signs. A lot of times you'll see many people living together in the same house, poor living conditions. They don't speak the language. They don't have access to their own identification. That's a huge one for both sides. If you don't, Maria, who is another survivor that we train with a lot, she's like, I just didn't even realize that I could just go get another one, right? And especially if you're a foreign national, obviously that's a little bit harder, but it's just another way to control that person and say, I'm in charge of you. You can't have your, even your driver's license, any of those things on your person. Homes are places of business that are designed to keep people in and not out. So again, one of the places Maria was kept, it was actually like a really rundown motel, but it had video cameras coming in, right? And they're like, well, why do you need, like, the video camera should go out if it's for security, right? So it was really meant to keep people in. So those are some things to pay attention to for labor trafficking.
So sex traffic warning signs. We have under 18 in prostitution. Again, there's no such thing as a child prostitute. Signs of physical abuse, submissive or fearful, including no eye contact. Answers to appear to be scripted or rehearsed. Inability to speak to an individual alone. Usually the person is always with them. Controlling, so a lot of that, like an employer.
So Sandra, when the other people are speaking for them, a lot of times that's the bottom. So a lot of times there will be another female with them, and they will not allow them to be by themselves because they'll give something away. So
yeah,
it's kind of.
So then again, substance use, no control over the money or documents, and then branding tattoos. So I have experience with that. I actually had a tattoo on my finger. I just had it covered up by a dedication tattoo in Denver. And so it was super healing, super great. But yeah, so it was part of my experience. So just wanted to share a little piece of that. I'm sorry, what? The dedication tattoo was very interesting. Yes. I actually, with Maria Tell that we do these trainings with, she actually got her tattoo covered up by the same guy, and his name I can't remember his name right now, but I can give that to you at a later time. But he's Haley is his name.
Yeah, and we have connections too for just having tattoos removed.
Yes.
So a lot of like the tattoos and the branding, it's literally when you think of branding cattle, that is the purpose of it, right?
Mhm.
And so it's to say this person belongs to me, this person is my property. So like Sandra's was on her ring finger. We know another survivor who had a chess piece. Basically, you're a pawn in the game. So there you'll see crowns sometimes, not Sandra, Maria's, this middle one was Maria's who we work with. You can't see it super well, but the S is actually a dollar sign. That was on her hand, so it was really visible, and maybe, basically just to say, this is the purpose, you're here to make money for me.
Sometimes it's bags of money. Like you'll see a bag of money on their hand, or like just a dollar sign even, yeah.
And it's so like I said, I have teenagers, and so my daughter will be like, I saw a crown. And you're like, okay, but it doesn't always mean that, right?
Yeah.
Like don't like run up to the person, but if you're seeing multiple, obviously, of these things, there is actually barcodes. There'll be things that say daddy's bitch, excuse my language, or yeah, I mean, just those kinds of things. There'll be queen because he's seen as the king, she's seen as the queen. And again, it's not always male and female, but there can be that dynamic. So it's just something to be aware of. Sometimes we have a survivor that we worked with. They all had a number 7 here because there was 7 girls that belonged to that trafficker. Sometimes it's a gang-related one. So we had another one that had a tattoo here that showed which gang she belonged to. When it was talking about not making eye contact, that's actually a huge one. So they will be taught to walk behind them and with their eyes down at the ground. Again, another way to dehumanize them. But also, if they look at another man or trafficker in the eye, that can be basically saying, I'm now choosing that person, choosing up.
Yeah, it's called sideballing is what it's called. It's another term. And so really when that happens, the person who is being trafficked then has to pay the pimp for looking at the other pimp, and then we'll go with the other pimp. So she has to pay off the pimp in order to leave.
Yeah, so just kind of crazy thing.
Mm-hmm.
Other things, like I was mentioning, gang-related tattoos. Around here, these are just things to be aware of: 3 dots, dog paws, paw prints, sports logos, and multiple individuals having the same tattoo. There was another one that we worked with. All of the girls had dolphins because the guy's name was Dolph. So it's just, there's, again, just things to be aware of, especially when we're talking to like medical examiners and those types of things. It's things to be that they're going to see, or EMS, like they might be aware of those types of things.
Can you say more about the 3 dots?
Do you know the 3 dots?
That's like south side. Yeah. It's usually here or right here in like a little triangle. Yeah. Like just like dot, 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 like
so
that.
Like yeah.
So like a triangle like this, but with dots. No, it's okay.
So how many of you only work with adults? How many of you guys work with kids? Most people do both. Okay. So use specific signs. Like I was saying, 1 in 3 homeless youth are approached by a sex trafficker within 48 hours of leaving home. Okay, that seems really high, right? But when you think then of, hey, all you have to do is have sex with me and I'm going to give you a bed. Or all you have to do is, this sex act and I'll give you drugs because you are in pain and that's why you're running away from your family of origin, right? So Maria and I, and then Ashley. So there's 3 different nonprofits locally that we're part of, the MDTs locally here. So the multidisciplinary task forces, Larimer County and Weld County have anti-trafficking task forces. Most of that is focused on youth, and most of it is focusing on these kids who are frequent runaways. And that's part of the reason of that, because they're so quickly manipulated and not coming from good families either. So things to look for with kids, kind of some of the same things: submissive, nervous, avoids eye contact, lack of trust in adults, and or you guys, I'm sure, have seen this. So they're either not sharing anything or they're oversharing everything, right? Multiple stories that don't make sense, frequently runs. So especially those kids that are frequently running away from home, it may be happening at home too, but oftentimes they're getting involved in that later. truancy, status crimes, breaking curfew, trespassing, false reporting, malnourishment, lack of health care, exhausted for their age, and then sexually transmitted diseases younger than age 12.
Yeah, so with this youth victims, we have signs of sexual abuse, and that's refusing to go to school, public masturbation, young reports, /young. Okay, reports of nightmares or bedwetting, demonstrates sexual knowledge beyond their age, reports sexual abuse by parent or others, attaches very quickly to strangers. Parents may be indifferent to their child. They can't explain injuries, harsh discipline, and shows little concern or sees a child as a burden. So with my lived experience, the things that I experienced whenever I was trying to get help were failure. Failed to recognize as human trafficking. All they saw was my addiction and my mental health, which was psychosis, and I am bipolar, and I have an anxiety disorder, and I was using the psych ward as a place to be safe. And so, like, I was a repeater, but really, I just wanted to be stable on meds and be sober. And I was homeless in like 60 below zero weather. So for me, like, being in that place was safe for me.
Really quick, do you want to start a little earlier? Like, you're from Loveland. You want to tell them a little bit more about your story first?
In Loveland, I grew up in Loveland, and my parents, my dad was born in Loveland as well. He was the 14th child in his family, and he experienced abuse from my grandpa, and so he had brain damage, and so he had to take care of my grandma, and so my parents didn't have the skills to teach me anything. They were addicted to substances, and so with that, I experienced like my family playing Uno and doing cocaine, so that was normal for me. So growing up, that's exactly what I turned to, was drugs. I dropped out of school, and I started hanging out with unsafe people, and then which led to criminalization instead of protection. I didn't have anywhere to go. Like, I was isolated in Alaska. I met my husband in Colorado Springs, had a child. He had me isolated. I had to take care of her. I wasn't allowed to have a job. So with that, I rebelled and met a person that I thought was like a great guy, and he ended up being a part of Hell's Angels. So with that, I didn't have any safe place to go. And so I was sleeping in abandoned houses up there, staying warm by propane heaters. And with my human needs were unmet, so I couldn't take a shower. I was taking like shower baths in the sinks at like campgrounds or in gas stations. Sometimes I wasn't bathing at all. And then there was no place for me to relocate. So when I experienced my trafficking, my one trafficker tried to take my life, and I was able to get away. And my other trafficker paid for a plane ticket for me to go to Anchorage, and I was getting a restraining order from the one, and I was still in it. And I wasn't aware at all. And so with that, I had barriers to identification. They stole my ID and would like place it in places and then like give me these like riddles of where it is, and then I found it. Yeah, it's just really weird stuff, but it's like mind control, that type of stuff. So with that, like, my trauma was misunderstood. Like, for me, I didn't realize I had all these mental health problems because my parents grew up in a time whenever that stuff, like talking about it, we don't talk about it. And so a lot of my dad's family members have mental health problems and they never got treated. So I was like, what is that? What is bipolar disorder? I am not crazy. And now working in mental health and taking care of my mental health, I understand that those things don't define me. They help me be able to connect with people as a peer specialist and say, hey, I have problems too, and I struggle every single day. And so we just take it one day at a time, and the meds help me. So, and then I had lack of coordination between systems. So what that looked like is like my service providers wouldn't communicate with each other, or I wouldn't have a service provider believe me. And I was robbed at gunpoint at the store, and there was a camera, and the cops came because I called them, and because I was on meth, I had the cops say, "Oh, well, I have a brother with schizophrenia," and I'm like, "No, just because I'm on drugs, go look at the camera. I'm just saying I got robbed." And so they didn't believe me. "Oh, well, we'll give you a ride." They gave me a ride back to my trafficker. So with that, I was very isolated. My ex-husband wouldn't let me see my kids unless it was at like a supervised thing, and that was so hard for me. It's hard for me not to cry about that, but he would keep them from me, and still to this day I have a hard time because he still does that. And like, so these were just the things I experienced, and so I appreciate you allowing me to be a little bit emotional about it. But so yeah, that's just a little bit about what I experienced. Appreciate you letting me share.
I want to say, since we have known Sandra got her GED, she got a new car, she got married, she got custody of one of her girls back. So Sandra has made absolutely incredible, and she got a job in the field that she wanted to be in, which was the mental health field. So,
and I just bought a house.
And so, yeah, forgot about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And they were all SMART goals that I did in the economic empowerment program with 1024 Ministries, and I was able to accomplish all those SMART goals just within like 2 or 3 years. Yeah.
So, and I think that what we feel like is so impactful, and the importance of stories like Sandra's is I think we all need to be encouraged that we need to always not forget to see what God sees, right? We need to see the souls and the humans. And yeah, there might be substance abuse issues and there might be mental health issues, but that does not define who a person is. God gets to define that. And so it's just so important that we are doing our best as service providers and community members to one, help people identify and understand where they're at and get connected to services, and to just see them as humans. There's so many stories from survivors that we've worked with that they have to, at some point, right, kind of make the choice that they want to find healing and exit those situations. They're not rescued. Maybe some of the kids are rescued, but we don't use the word rescue because they really are doing that hard work of walking that road, but helping them to identify that, and then seeing them as humans and realizing that we just need to help provide them with all the services we can.
Well, also, I just want to say, like, one of the things that really had me feel human is when people would look at me and smile when I was sitting on the streets and like have a conversation with me like there wasn't something wrong with me. That was the most normal I had felt when I was going through that experience. So even just saying, "Hi, how are you?" You know, just something like that can really help empower somebody.
And we all, probably everybody in this room wants to save the world, right? Like we kind of are in the line of work we are, and we have to kind of maybe have a savior complex every now and then. We just want to do all that we can for all the people, but it is often those. I mean, we hear those stories over and over again. For one of the survivors that we know, it was literally a cup of hot chocolate that was given to her by somebody, and just seeing her and looking her in the eyes and treating her as human. So we always want to think that the road to it has to be perfect. We have to do all the right things, but it's really, let's just treat people as humans, see them how God would see them. So you guys probably could teach us some of this, but the psychological impacts of complex trauma, there's often delayed disclosure. As you guys know, trauma makes things not be presented in a linear way. you guys being able to advocate on behalf of victims is huge, because with law enforcement, especially, a lot of times when they're disclosing things, it's not linear, and so it's not believed, especially when there maybe is substance abuse and mental health. So that's one thing that I think could still use a lot of improvement. And they mean well, and they have a lot on their plate, but like law enforcement has a really hard time seeing through that. Sometimes they're like, okay, I got to get to the next case. This isn't making sense. So anything that you guys can do on that. Trauma bonding, you guys know about complex PTSD, obviously, all the complex trauma that they're dealing with. Disassociation is huge. We see that with pretty much all of our survivors, especially when they first come to us. And borderline personality disorder, anxiety and mood disorders are huge. Substance use issues. The substance use issues, I just want to point out that the intersection of that and trafficking can be all across the board. So it can be the reason that they had a vulnerability in the first place. It can be a coping mechanism when they're there. It can actually be administered to them. So, and you can talk to this too. I don't know if this is part of your story, but like for Maria that we work with, she would actually, so meth is water soluble. So they actually, excuse the graphicness of it, but they can like put it in your rear end while you're sleeping and do things like that. So she did have somewhat of an addiction issue, but it was just made that much worse. And then she felt that much crazier. And, so it was just that way to further manipulate her.
Yeah, for me, like they had me selling drugs, and so I had an endless supply of drugs. And so I had everything I need, and I had all these people around me, so I was protected. But also, there were times when they were putting like fentanyl or heroin in it, and would videotape me like falling asleep, and then that's whenever things that would happen that I didn't know about, like pictures and those types of things. So
and so there's legal challenges as well, which adds to that as well. So multiple things there. Sometimes it's not linear when they're trying to explain it. Almost every person that we've worked with has had a cop as either their buyer or their trafficker. So there's a lot of distrust of law enforcement. And there's always bad guys, right, in every area. So this is not to speak ill of law enforcement. We love law enforcement. We know a lot of them do a great job, but we just say that to help you to understand there doesn't feel like there's a safe place to go, as Sandra mentioned. There doesn't feel like there's, okay, I'm just going to call the cops and everything's going to be okay. Like they don't have that experience. Maria that we work with as well, she was trafficked in Sydney, Nebraska. So when we talk about small towns, Sydney is the same size as Eaton, basically. But there was cops that were basically in on the whole thing. So if you try to run or you try to get away, there's no, the safe person is working with your trafficker. So, so it is under prosecuted because oftentimes the victim either is very scared of the trafficker or they're still attached to them. Like, if it's an intimate partner, they still feel like they love them. And obviously if it's a parent, that's true as well. So often
they turn on you if you try to like give them some kind of assistance, like you're reaching out to save you.
It kind of depends on where they're at in their journey, for sure. I think that they have to be ready for that. Sometimes they don't see it. So that's when we talk about like giving them the verbiage, some of the ladies that we've worked with didn't know that that's what was happening to them until they had been part of some things and went, oh, like now I see, like I was controlled here and I was controlled here and I was controlled here. Yeah, I think and we'll talk about it a little bit more. Yes.
They have a light bulb moment, and that shifts you kind of in a different phase of the work.
Yes. And so like choice is huge, and we'll talk about that in a second, but like they have had all choice removed from them, right? It's like, you do this, you're controlled here, I'm going to know where you're at, I'm going to control who you're with. And so even just giving them choices or who they can talk to, or just helping them, and even just kindly saying, hey, I think maybe this could have been part of what happened to you. Let me explain to you what this looks like. What do you think? Those types of things, that can be huge. What are your thoughts on that? Like if they would turn on you when you're saying, I think you were trafficked.
So for me, like I didn't identify until I was in a shelter in Greeley with another survivor. Her husband was trafficking her, and also she experienced familiar trafficking. Her dad was a trafficker and a bunch of his friends or something, but she was telling me her story, and I was like, oh my gosh, this shit happened to me. Excuse my language, but I was like, holy crap. In that moment, I was like, I can't believe this. And then like everything started to make sense. And so, yeah, because I had spent a lot of time running to all these different states trying to figure out what is happening. Like, I don't get it. And so it wasn't until someone else told me their lived experience where it was like, oh, but like I had other people, like my family, service providers, my friends saying, hey, you're not okay. You need to leave that. You need to get clean. And I'm like, no. And it wasn't until like I almost lost my life that I was like, okay, I need to go. So, yeah. So I left Anchorage, went to Minnesota. I ended up being with the pimp, but I was able to get out of that situation. I had the cops come pick me up and take me to a shelter, and that's where my whole life changed. I met my husband, and we lifted each other up, got clean together, you know, and so we're doing great now. So, yeah.
So, common mistakes, and so this goes to kind of what you guys are doing. So, trying to get the whole story too soon, and some of this I'm sure you guys know, but oftentimes even as service providers, it's like you feel like you could do such a better job, right? If you just knew the whole story, but that's really not where they're at. They need to just do it in their own time, in their own space as they're ready. So that's huge. Again, not why didn't you just leave, but why did it feel hard to leave? What happened that made it feel this way? Why, just asking more questions, being more curious than kind of putting our own feelings on them, if that makes sense. Mistaking survival behaviors for personality flaws. So there's a lot of things when you're trying to survive, even like manipulation. Like if you're living on the streets, you are going to use manipulation to survive, right? Some of those things, you're doing it for survival, not because it's who you are. It doesn't get to define who you are. So trying to step back and realize that as a service provider. Expecting gratitude, like you mentioned, or rapid progress. Sometimes I think we want to be like, oh, thank you. I'm so glad. Thank you for all this. And they're like, I'm not even sure I'm glad I'm here. So I think it's really, again, realizing it's about them and offering them the ability to move forward at their pace where they're ready, and they'll get there when they're ready to get there.
That's what we do at the Homeland Security Ops. So we go in as victim centered. And so they're not looking to arrest. They're looking to provide services and support of why are they there, and how can we help them so they can go home and not have to do what they're trying to do to get money. Or if they have a pimp giving them a gift card and they're leaving with something that might not be what the pimp wanted, but it's something, so we had a lady come in and she was going to get evicted, and she owed a couple $1,000s, and we had an org pay her rent, and so she was able to go home and try and make that stable for her. So those are the kind of things that we experienced in that space, and it was a really awesome thing.
Yeah, one of the other issues, and Sandra has mentioned that a few times too, is sometimes we can see, okay, if you can get through this trauma, right, you're going to be more stable and you're going to be able to get a job and you're going to be able to do these things. But sometimes it's like, hey, I have these physical needs, the whole Maslow's, hierarchy, helping them to get those physical needs met first, and or alongside of doing the work with them as well. Ignoring the importance of choice, as we mentioned before, that's a huge thing. And it can be small choices. I mean, literally, you want to sit here or you want to sit there? Do you want a male or a female? Do you want to talk about this first or that first? I think the EMDR would be really helpful for you, but do you want to try it this way, or do you want to put that off till next week? Just small choices. They haven't been given those. And so that can really make a huge difference. Labeling clients as non-compliant or resistant, they, again, they have to get there in their own time. It can feel, because of everything that we've mentioned, they are still in survival mode. We've seen it takes, it's obviously different for everybody, but I feel like it takes 2 or 3 or 4 years after they get out, the end of their trafficking experience, to really feel like they're stable and able to move forward and really change things.
Overlooking the trauma bonds, assuming that all survivors have the same experience, using judgmental languages, promiscuous, prostitute, bad choices, trying to rescue the survivor, failing to recognize complex PTSD, not understanding grooming and coercive control, ignoring secondary trauma, and confusing compliance with healing.
Because sometimes you'll get that too, where it's like, okay, sure, I'll do all that you say, but it's kind of blank still. And I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about, but it's like really getting to the bottom of it with them. So best practices, helping them to prioritize their safety first. So I think even just like the safety plans sounds silly, but like for them to know what to do in each one of those situations, building trust slowly and consistently, not expecting it right away, and just kind of continuing to show up. I think sometimes what can happen too, and something to just be aware of in this group, is sometimes you have survivors who are ready to move forward and ready to do healing, and then you have people who maybe are going to have 3 or 4 or 5 years of really feeling stuck and being, from our point of view, feeling stuck. And so just consistently showing up, and also having enough resources within your own tool bag that you're getting the help that you need, because sometimes it can be really hard and heavy on this side of things as well. So you can't show up consistently if you're not getting the care you need, and making sure that you really are who they need, if that makes sense.
But also with that, like, I know that, like some of you may work alongside case management, but really having resources that are actually legitimate, because as a survivor, like some of us like don't want to sit here and call like lists or get a big resource list, because they're going to not do it, so having those resources that are real. And so that is something that I did at the Avery Center when I worked with survivors all over the United States, is I sit there and Google, is this real? Okay, no. And I would sit there and just go through, and then I'd be like, okay, these are the real ones. If we're looking to relocate, I would find one that would be able to do that, and really just putting in the groundwork before giving these folks the resources, because if they're not real, they're going to be like, oh, that person just gave me some fake stuff, and they're wasting my time, so.
Yeah, it's just another person failing them, right? And so, yeah, the more you can show up and have good resources, the better. We talked about offering choices, collaborating, don't direct. So we kind of mentioned that as well. Anytime that you can collaborate with them on their care or what they need next, all of those things, the better. Focus on their strengths, right? If they are standing there that day, they are resilient and strong. And so helping them to see that, helping them to see that just by being there that day, they are already strong and courageous and made in God's image, and there's a plan for them, all of those things. So I think that's a huge, huge part of it. And I think, all of our ladies that we've worked with, when they start to see what they're good at, and it can be little things too, like even if you can introduce them to small things that they're good at. Are they good at art? Are they good at things that maybe don't matter to the rest of the world? They're not going to maybe provide a income or any of those things, but just like seeing those things that they're already good at, as I think can be huge. Normalizing trauma responses, just helping them to understand like what you're doing, how you've acted, because I think sometimes there can be shame in that, like you had mentioned, there's some resistance, but like normalizing, okay, you did that because you were in pain, you did that because you were trying to survive, you did that, and here's now the healthy way forward. Screening, obviously, for the right things, right? Disassociation, substance use, ongoing exploitation. Oftentimes we see that too. So even with, the ladies that we have worked with, you see where they fall back into that. They fall back into a situation and it's different. It's maybe not trafficking, but they're still being exploited because it just feels normal. And so they don't know, maybe it's a roommate wants extra money and, they're like, hey, I can't pay for the place this time. You just pay all of it. And they're like, well, okay. They don't understand what like real relationships look like versus exploitative relationships, and just help them understand how that can look. And then, like we were saying, coordinating with multidisciplinary partners. One thing that's huge. So Maria that we work with, she has a Courageous Rose, which is she's a survivor, lived experience expert as well, and she does some peer support. That can be huge. Or Sandra has her card here too.
I just have two. You'll have to.
But just having somebody that's been there, like Sandra was saying, sometimes if they can talk to somebody who has actually lived that, it's so much different, right? Than talking to the rest of them. They're like, no, no, you don't understand. I didn't, this happened to me. This didn't. And then they talk to somebody who's been there and they're like, oh yeah, I think that was my experience. And also explaining to them their rights, like whether it's in the workforce, in a relationship, in in like law enforcement, it's important for them to understand they have rights and what those looks like. A lot of times they don't really understand what that is. So and understanding again that healing takes years and there is going to be setbacks, and sometimes they do go back into it. Sometimes they've been trafficked and then that's all they know, so they go back into it because they're like, I don't know how to make a living or how to provide for my family or how to feel good about myself or whatever unless I'm doing that. Sometimes what we can even see is when they will exit that and try to get into what we would see as sustainable work. A lot of times they have criminal backgrounds, all of that, so they're making minimum wage and they're like, well, I used to be worth $1,000 a day and now I'm worth 100. Like, we understand the difference in that, right? But in their world they're not. They're like, well, so I have less value now and life is harder and it's harder to make it. So just again providing them with as much support.
And just to bounce off what you're saying is I got out of jail and got a job at Wendy's, and so I was surviving on like $400, and child support was taking $230 of that because so I was living on very minimal money, and I was like, dude, why am I doing this? But I had really good support, and was able to reach out to the church and have some people come and pray with me and stuff to help me get through that. But yeah,
because all of us, honestly, we sometimes tie our worth to what we make, right? And so when you're like, well, I have all these barriers now to employment and I'm still tying it to that, it's like, what do we expect, right? So as you're meeting with them too, like, be thinking labor trafficking versus sex trafficking. Sometimes that will overlap too. Sometimes, unfortunately, too, we even see it in treatment centers. We've had multiple individuals that we've worked with that have actually been like, we had one that we worked with. She before she came to us, but she had gone through multiple sober livings, and they would get her clean, and then they would literally party with her after she was left, and they'd send her to another one, like, to make money off of her. We see where they're like sexually exploited when they're in there. We see where they've had like the workers there will actually have them do their jobs and expect them, like, it's an internship. Like, I mean, it's kind of crazy too what we see inside of that. So I just want to say that to say, like, believe them on that too, because it's happening out there. We don't want it to be. We all want to think like if we're in this realm and doing this work, everybody has the best of intentions, but unfortunately that's not always the case. Obviously their developmental history, we actually see too that where it happens with people with developmental disabilities often, because again, they have a vulnerability. Who are they going to tell? Who's going to believe them? That kind of thing. And their culture. So there's certain cultures too that we see where it's everything the dad says in that culture happens, or grandpa, or those types of things. So we do see certain cultures where this happens more, or like the forced marriage, which is basically the same thing. Immigration status for the reasons we mentioned, substance use, previous trauma, and then their ongoing exploitation risk. Do you want to talk about what you've seen with these different things, Sandra?
So I actually have done all these things. And so dialectical behavior therapy is where I was able to connect all the dots and be like, oh, the light bulb, there it is. And so it helped me figure out, like, distress tolerance is super important in my life. So I have a little kit that I keep of spinners, coloring, like the little Neato thing, stuff like that, to help me be able to, and also like ways to communicate with people in interpersonal relationships and staying in the wise mind instead of emotional or rational mind, and really defining what that looks like for me. And then EMDR has really helped me be able to like process things that happened to me when I was a child and why I was making the decisions I was making later on in life, and move through those things. And then biofeedback, I actually did that where it was called a heart map. And then they do they tape this thing to your finger and they monitor your temperature. And so you learn to meditate through your heart rate, through breathing, and following the map, because a lot of people have a hard time learning to meditate and get in that state because a lot of people have racing thoughts or they get distracted. And so, of course, acknowledging it, letting it go. But it's another way to learn how to meditate that's a little bit easier for folks who have a hard time. And so then neurofeedback, I actually had like a scanning of my brain, and it shows where like the alpha and beta are. So people who experience like no trauma in their life, their whole brain is gray. Okay. People who experience trauma, like for me, it's orange here and orange back here. So I'm missing alpha and beta here and here. And so when I would do my treatments, I would play a little game with my eyes. Some people watch movies, and I would race around a track. And so it would help me be able to get my brain back on track of the things that I was missing in my brain. So yeah, just to kind of stand on those.
So the impact that we've talked about, and here's some other questions that you guys can ask, and I'll go over those, but excuse me. I think one of the biggest things that like we talked about is just treating them as a human and with kindness. Honestly, that's where we see the biggest. And like, hey, you went back into it, I'm still here. I'm still going to be here. I'm going to be steady. I'm going to do all these things, and I'm going to be available. But again, going back to the choice, even if this isn't in a professional, but you're just as a person out there, are you safe in this environment? Are you safe with in this situation with this person? Do you have the ability to move about freely? Do you have access to all of your documents? Maria that we worked with before, her trafficker was actually her husband, and he would literally hold her purse and hold her documents and have everything with her. And so she'd be pulled over, and that like she'd tell the cop, and I go, yeah, okay. And she's like, no, like literally he holds my purse for me. He also made her, gave her counterfeit money and made her spend that at Walmart to then further, basically victimize her, because then the cops could keep her in that location. She couldn't leave the state because she was on probation or whatever. So that's a big thing. And again, are they under 18? Like get them connected with the right things. And if they seem out of place, why are they there? So for example, if there's, Loveland is not necessarily super racially diverse, for example, if there is, or like Eaton, there isn't really a gang presence in Eaton. So if there's somebody that's there, like they're doing something nefarious. Sometimes what we see too, though, is law enforcement, they have a job for the city for bad things not to happen there, but oftentimes what we can see is they're just pushing it along, right? So they're like scaring them from there, but they're not always doing all the work to get a conviction, and it's hard, to be fair. But so just paying attention to, like, a lot of times what the traffickers will do is they'll move people along in different hotels and motels, often. So they'll do down I-25 or down 34 or down 85 where we're at. Sorry. So Dondi and I have known each other for a while. Dondi called me, and there was a motel that actually is pretty well known for nefarious things happening in Evans. And Dondi did all the right things. She called everything in, but literally was still on the phone with the person. So she called the cops. By the time the cops got there, somebody had been alerted, and it was an underage person that was being trafficked there. And so so I'll touch on that in a second. But so what we suggest when you call in, or if you do have any experiences with this, is call multiple levels of law enforcement. So call county and state, or excuse me, city and county. Do those things, because unfortunately we don't know who the bad guys are and who the good guys are. And so maybe even tell them that, hey, I already called Weld County. I just wanted to let you know that I'm calling this, and whether you did already or not, but just because unfortunately we don't know who's on what side of everything. So
to kind of further, so I called the local Evans police, and then I was on the phone with the person. He called me right back, the person who had reported it to me. And while we were on the phone, his hotel phone rang, and it was the front desk yelling at him for calling the police. And so they cleared everything out. And then when I called the officer, he was less than friendly to me, and I started pushing back, like, obviously someone from your office warned. And then Colette and I talked, and Colette was like, best to just, well, actually, no, then I called the national number to report it all, because I was like, obviously the police were involved in this because they cleared it all out before they came. And the national person, because I said, well, that's it, I'm complaining to everyone, the senator, whatever. I was really mad. And she was like, no, you need to be quiet and just walk away, because your life will be in danger if you keep poking this bear. So
also, like, there's an aspect that not a lot of people realize, is that the hotel people are a part of it, and so it could have been the front desk person. That's why they were hollering at the dude, because they're the ones that are like, get out of here. To me, that's what it feels like to me. And so I've seen that before.
Yeah, so we love to train them as well, if you guys know anybody in the hospitality industry.
This random man called me. This random man called me and said, are you a mandated reporter? And I was like, well, yeah, but it doesn't work like that, but whatever. And he's like, well, I need help immediately. There's a little girl being trafficked right next to my room, and I need you to call the police because I'm afraid. And so I did. And then he called me immediately back and was like, oh, you told him it was me. And I was like, I don't know who you are. I don't even know what room you're in. It wasn't that. And then he was on the cell phone with me when the hotel called and yelled at him. So, but it was like random. I mean, it was just when I was in my downtown office, and I just happened to be the closest counselor to that hotel.
But then, are you saying you?
Polaris. So
yeah.
Yeah.
But when you called like the higher up police or whatever.
So she called the National Trafficking Hotline. So Polaris, and it is true. I mean, I don't know that I 100% agree with like just back off, but you don't want to like just involve yourself and go rescue the person, because it is very dangerous. Like there's a lot more to it than you think. So you want to get the right people involved.
So what do you do? Like
that's why I said like get multiple levels of law enforcement involved. At this point, what I would suggest is contacting like myself or Maria, because we have connections with the MDTs where we know that the people that are in those. So we have FBI, and like we do have some Evans police, some Greeley police. Like I'm in the Weld County, but I have two basically coworkers that are in the one here. But they, we can then communicate it to the people that really, but still dial 911, still do all the things, right? If somebody is in danger, do those things. But I would just suggest calling another level of law enforcement, whether it's, county or whatever, just so all the right things are happening, because and Evans, I don't know.
There is a real urgency, right? Because they move regularly, they're surveilling things, they're very vigilant, right? So you don't want to sit on it, but if they can call you first, then a lot of times that's gonna.
Yeah, I mean, and if somebody's in danger, like, I mean, I'm not a cop, so yes, call law enforcement. But like, if you're trying to like, hey, this is happening and something isn't right, something's not sitting right, that's when I would say like call one of us so that we can say, hey, okay, this, but if you can, like, keep track of who was the cop that you talked to, who was the county law enforcement, because I have no problem following up on that. So, but I'm not asking you guys to do that. Definitely feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to follow up with the right people, but it is a dangerous thing. So you don't want to, like, the whole rescue mentality is not really like something that we suggest, because really you need the people who know what they're doing, and you're going to put yourself in danger. So, but you want to call multiple levels of law enforcement, and we have some other numbers to call as well. But really quick, back to this. Try to see beyond the substance use, beyond the mental health. See them as children of God, right? Like, I mean, we all need those reminders, I think, even though that's where our heart is. And that's, because this work can get hard. Even when it's not something like this, it can get really hard and heavy. So I'm glad you guys have this group to encourage each other here as well, and say, like, hey, keep fighting the good fight. Keep treating them like God's children, because that's probably the most impactful. But and assessing those older vulnerabilities, are you seeing some of those tattoos? Are you seeing some of those things that kind of point that direction? And then again, providing choices anytime you can, even within your practices, if you have they might, even if it's a female, she might feel more comfortable with men, or she might, so just offering those as well as you can, referring to other resources. The more, and you guys know this, but the wider their network of support, the better, because they might fall through a crack somewhere. They might just really decide that they're going to be non-cooperative with you, but really enjoy just being around other survivors at a workshop. So sometimes different resources are going to hit them with what they need right then. And private communications, obviously, just because you never know who in their life is kind of turning them back in. If you would go to the next. So like we said, so this goes back to the questions. Do not try to remove the person yourself. Call local and county law enforcement. The National Trafficking Hotline is a great one too, that you can text it, you can call it. There's also a Colorado State hotline. They're good as well. They are especially good if you want to call, like, to help find other resources for people, and call alongside of them. That's often what we will suggest if you get somebody who's like ready to kind of move forward. Sometimes that's relocating and doing those types of things, especially the national and the state trafficking hotline can help with that, and other resources. If it's a missing child, 1-800 the lost. And then obviously if you need other resources, aren't sure where to go, we're happy to help as well. Any other thoughts on that as far as?
So I actually have been working with Safe House Project. And so what that is, which I think is super cool, is they will call the resources for you, for the survivor, but also because I'm currently supporting someone, and so I'm going to be calling some of the places too and advocating for her, but as well, they're calling places to find a bed, because Colorado resources for trafficking, there's very little right now. And so, like, either their programs are on hold, or they're not accepting anyone, or she doesn't meet the criteria. So with that, they actually call the resources, provide the places that have openings, and then they'll provide flight, bus, ticket, train, however to get there. And so with this particular person right now, getting into like a temporary shelter, and then Safe House Project will then help them get into a long-term transitional program. So the support doesn't stop here. And then they're like, I'm in another state, I have nothing, no extra support or anything like that. So it'll carry over. And so they'll continue to support and navigate her. Because once she leaves this county and she's not in the state anymore, I can't support her anymore because of my, So with that, being able to collaborate care and those types of things is super important. But yeah, so just wanted to mention that resource that's been super helpful for me as of recent.
What was it called?
Safe House Project. Yeah, and it's just safehouseproject.org. And on your phone, it doesn't pop up. But if you do it on a computer, there's an option that says find help, and someone will call you back right away. And so it's super helpful, because, sometimes working with these folks, these people are looking for like instant gratification of like right now. And so with that, they actually have like some kind of answer, and being able to talk to somebody and have some sort of peace of next steps, instead of getting like sent here, there, here, because that is overwhelming for people. Yeah.
And it sounds like they operate on a national level. Is that
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is there any? Do you guys have any other questions?
Can we, Simon Sharp, I'm gonna go back to it. Can we get this list of things, the best practice?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yep. These are just some of our sources. Awesome.
So is there a phone contact for you then?
Yes, it's on my card. Yep. Did you get? Yep. There's a phone resource right there.
Oh, there it is.
Yep. Yep. And Sandra's is over here. So yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.